What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I want to share with you 7 simple ideas that have changed how I see the world. They've given me clarity, it's given me confidence, it's given me perspective. If you take these 7 simple ideas and you apply them to your life, I think it can have a transformative effect. So number 1, the cost of inaction is always greater than the cost of wrong action. So many people wait on the sidelines until they have perfect information because they don't want to move forward and make a mistake. They're so afraid of taking the wrong step that they never actually get started. But in my experience, the thing that kills more dreams than making a mistake, than taking wrong action, is just to not take any action. Often we get into this analysis paralysis. You know, the people who they have this great idea for a business or this thing that they've always wanted to do, this goal that they have for their life, but they're constantly in preparation planning phase, and they never actually do the thing. So the guy who you've been friends with for the last 15 years, who every year he's like, oh, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to do this thing. Or that friend, Sally, who keeps talking about how she's going to go and backpack through Europe, and she's been saying that for 32 years, right? The truth is, these people will generally they'll get to the end of the road, they'll look back and they'll realize that they never did the thing. They always intended to do it, but they never actually took the action. And from what I've observed, that is why more dreams die of inaction than wrong action. So if you have something that you want to do in your life, if you have a big ambitious goal, a dream, just take action towards it. Don't wait until you have it perfect, because the truth is you will never have it perfectly planned out. So go as soon as you have the inspiration for that dream, whatever the thing is, go put it into motion. Number 2, failure is the most information-rich data set in the world. You should seek it out and you should use it. We learn so much more from our failures than we do our successes. I was learning how to shoot free throws last summer. And whenever the ball would go in, I would chalk it up to skill. And when the ball would go out, I would be like, oh, I just got unlucky, right? Now, when we chalk things up to skill and the ball going in on the first try, we don't sit there and ask ourselves, did I do this right? Because often we judge ourselves by the result, not by the input. And so the ball went in and I say, oh, I must have done it well. I did something right. And I don't look any deeper to understand, maybe I did something technically wrong. And this reminds me of something from Star Trek, a quote between Jean-Luc Picard and Data. Data is completely beside himself because he just lost this game of 4-dimensional chess or whatever. And he's sitting there and he can't quite understand it because he's like, I made the best move in every single situation. I made the optimal move, and yet somehow I still lost. And Jean-Luc Picard said, you can do everything right in life and still lose. That's not weakness, that's life. And in the same way that you can do everything right and still lose, you can do everything wrong and still win the game. It's very possible to throw the basketball at the hoop with no concern for technique, and it will go in. It doesn't mean you did it right. And so we need to disconnect the outcome from the input and whether or not we did the thing right or wrong. And Charlie Munger talks about this. He goes, the rationale we use to make a decision is more important than whether or not the decision is ultimately right or wrong. How you make the decision, not whether it's right or wrong, is what matters. And so when I think about that, it occurs to me that failure is the most information-rich data set, because when we fail, it gives us this opportunity to stop and look at it and say, okay, what did I do here? Did I do it right? Did I do it wrong? And that is typically a more powerful point of reflection for people than when they succeed, because they don't think to stop and ask themselves. But when the ball definitely doesn't go in the hoop, you should probably stop and figure out, why didn't it go in the hoop, right? And maybe you did everything right and you just need to keep doing it over and over and over, and you will improve over time. Or maybe you need to do something different. But either way, failure is not to be avoided. It is to be sought after. I'm a big fan of keeping a failure list. So it's like a failure scoreboard where each week you look back and you ask yourself, what did I try this week that didn't work how I thought it would? Try to log that stuff, not just the wins that you have throughout the week. And I like to judge my progress based off of how many failures and how fast I'm failing. That's just a fun way to turn this thing that a lot of people are kind of turned off by, which is like, oh, I lost. Turn that into a good thing. Turn the goal into, I want to stack as many failures as possible, as quickly as possible. All right. Third idea that I think can be very powerful in your life is that the universe doesn't care how you feel. It cares what you do. Your feelings do not change anything. They do not affect the universe unless it affects your actions. Now, a lot of times we let our emotions, our feelings stop us from taking the actions that would move us towards our goals. And that is why we need to be in control of our emotions, because if we don't control our emotions, they will control us. But at the end of the day, you can act in spite of how you feel. You don't have to feel motivated or disciplined or ready. You don't have to feel good. You just have to show up and do the work. And this leads to the fourth idea, which is that discipline doesn't matter if you love what you do. If you love working out, discipline doesn't matter. You're going to go do it, right? But if you don't love what you're doing, then discipline is the only thing that matters. So let me say this again. Discipline doesn't matter if you love what you do, but it's the only thing that matters if you don't. And for a lot of people, if you're not where you want to be in life, it's because the things that you need to do that would get you to move towards your goals are things that you don't like to do, and therefore you're not doing them. They require discipline to get. This was very difficult for me. Discipline is something I've always historically struggled with, but it wasn't until I realized that if I could not discipline myself into taking the actions that needed to be done, even when I didn't feel like it, because again, the universe doesn't care how you feel, it only cares what you do. It wasn't until I could separate my emotions from my actions and act in spite of my feelings always that I started to move towards my goals. All right. Number 5, this is very important. Never take advice or criticism from somebody you wouldn't trade places with. Don't take criticism or advice from somebody you wouldn't trade places with. The reason a lot of people are poor is because they're taking advice from other poor people. That's not your fault if you grew up in an environment like mine where nobody was ever really talking about money. It was like a middle-class existence, right? Nobody talks about money in that environment. And when they do talk about it, they're talking about it from their limited perspective. But if they aren't where you want to be, don't take their advice or their criticism. So if they're not in better shape than you, if they're not making more money than you, if they're not in great relationships themselves, don't take their advice, and certainly don't take their criticism. And this is very important as you're out there building your business. You will get a lot of criticism from people who want the best for you, friends and family, colleagues. Like, they want to keep you safe, right? But they don't have the thing that you want, the thing that you're moving towards. And so you should not listen to their advice or their criticisms. This is one of my favorite quotes. It's from Rick and Morty. Rick says, "Your boos mean nothing to me because I've seen what makes you cheer." It's such a good line. It's so good because, like, so many of the people that we would take criticism from, we wouldn't want their lives. We wouldn't approve of the things that they approve of, and yet we let their criticisms through our guard. Why should we ever let them into such valuable terrain as the garden of your mind? Don't do it. All right, number 6. This is the secret to accomplishing literally anything that you want in this life. Literally, the only thing that you have to do is become the type of person who always does what you say. If you say, "I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and you do it every day, awesome. If you say, "I'm going to go to the gym," and you do it no matter what, if you say, "I'm going to show up and do the work, I'm going to make the cold calls, I'm going to do the necessary investment here to get the output," if you always show up and do what you say, then you can accomplish anything. And I know it sounds trite to say that, like, okay, well, I can't fly, right? But I do believe that if you stack this pile of proof, of evidence in your life that you are the person who shows up and does what you say no matter what, and you keep those promises that you make to yourself, then you always find a way to follow through. Then you can inevitably get to this place where you could learn to fly, whether that's learning how to fly a plane or learning how to hang glide or learning how to fly a squirrel suit, right? There's all sorts of different manifestations of this, but it all starts with just becoming the type of person who always does what they say. And if you can't do that one thing, then I'm sorry, you're not going to go anywhere in life. If you can't show up and keep the promises that you make to yourself, you're going nowhere. Number 7, the risk of mediocrity is greater than the risk of failure. This is one of my favorite Michelangelo quotes. He said, "The greatest danger is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it's too low and we reach it." If you set your goals, your dreams for your life to always be within your arm's grasp, then you will only ever move toward as far as your arm can reach. But if you set your sights so much further than your current reach, your current capacity, then you will go so much further. And I encourage that for you to go for your greatness and don't settle for a life of mediocrity, because at the end of this game, at the end of this road, this end of this life that you're going to look back on, you're going to be filled with regret if you settled for complacency and mediocrity. And you're going to wonder what could have been if I hadn't been so afraid of trying, if I hadn't been so afraid of failing, if I hadn't been so afraid of the judgments of people who weren't even thinking about me in the first place, if I hadn't let those things stop me, what could I have done? I don't want that for you. So accept that failure is an inevitable part of the equation and go for your greatness. And I'll be here supporting you every step of the way. But until then, stay happy, folks, my friend.